welcome into today's episode of Around the Slice. As you know, we are just a mere days away now from the 2025 NFL Draft. We are here for our annual big draft preview show here on Around the Slice. To preview the big event from a Bills perspective, I, of course, brought in special guest Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills. First and foremost, Joe, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule leading up to the draft to talk Bills draft with me today.
Thanks, Aiden. Good to be on with you, and thanks for having me.
Now, before we get into anything too specific, I just wanted to ask you, what has been your favorite thing from the Bills and Brandon Beane, their front office, so far this offseason leading up to this point thus far through the draft process? It can be a specific signing, player addition, situation, whatever direction you want to go with it.
I think the low-hanging fruit is the contract extension for Josh Allen, seeing that get done and feeling like it's not been a huge issue or a burden or anything like that, but just to know that it's taken care of. We don't have to wonder about Josh Allen and where he's paid among the top quarterbacks in the NFL. It's done. It's taken care of. You're not really thinking about that. And I think overall the extensions in general have been really good. The values have come in for guys like Khalil Shakir and Terrell Bernard and Greg Rousseau. I think those have all been very good deals to keep your best young talent, and this nucleus is reforming right now, and you're kind of getting an idea of who the Bills are prioritizing, and I've enjoyed seeing that come together. If I had to say an outside player, Josh Palmer, the receiver, a player I definitely had on my radar for the Bills to sign in free agency, and I think he gives the Bills the route running that they're missing on the outside, and so I'm pretty excited about Josh Palmer's arrival here for this offense.
I'm right there with you. I've been very satisfied. My answer is I've been very satisfied with all the in-house extensions, Rousseau, Bernard, Josh Allen and company. They've all been really locked up. And I don't know about you, but to me, all of these have been values and they've come in under projections. And I've been really satisfied with the value Brandon Beane's been able to get out of these contracts.
Yeah, no doubt. You've nailed it. Based on the projections that you've seen out there, these deals have come in under. And I think I forgot to mention Christian Benford as well, but that's another one to highlight is, in terms of these extensions.
James Cook aside, that's a very difficult conversation that I not have the energy to get into right now because I've already broke it down a whole episode a couple of months ago when the whole saga, if you will, started. But moving on to more specifically, this is always going to be a hot button topic. Are the Bills still Super Bowl contenders after yet another playoff disappointment in the AFC Championship right before the Super Bowl once again, with the holes on defense, with the retooling of the roster last year? This is always going to be a question. Are the Bills a Super Bowl contender still? Joe Marino, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, it's an easy answer here. It's obviously yes. I mean, you talk about holes on the defense. I think their defensive personnel is better today than it was a few months ago when they took the Kansas City Chiefs to the brink in the AFC Championship game. Josh Allen's entering his age 29 season as the NFL MVP.
Yep.
Comfortably, the Bills are a Super Bowl contender, and nothing has changed or given me any reason to believe anything otherwise.
I think the narratives were heavily skewed negative last year. If I agree, if that was their quote unquote like reset and rebuilding year, whatever you want to call it, then I'm very excited for that going forward. Now at this very early stage of projection, I just want to throw a couple of names out there on offense and defense. We'll start with offense. Looking ahead, right before the draft, who is your one X factor for the Bills and offense for the 2025 season at this early stage? Again, it can be someone people aren't talking about enough, someone that's going to fly under the radar, maybe a camp name or two that's going to impress. Who is that for offense first?
I'll say Dalton Kincaid. I feel like very foolishly some people have lost hope in Dalton Kincaid, which I don't really understand. The guy had a top 10 season all time in the history of the NFL as a rookie at tight end. Comfortably.
Yes.
And then obviously expectations were high in year two, and nobody's going to argue that he met those expectations. But there's so much context that matters, starting with Josh Allen not being good enough for Dalton Kincaid. Catchable ball rate, not good enough on throws beyond 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. A lot of production hanging out there. Dalton played with injuries. Obviously a huge ask of him to step in and kind of be the go-to option in the passing game. And obviously the lingering thought we have from Dalton Kincaid is him dropping that pass that would have extended the drive and potentially, an all-time great throw in the history of the NFL by Josh Allen. That's all anyone's thinking about right now. And I think we've lost context. I think we're really missing out on understanding the development of a player that is late to football, that, basketball player didn't really start playing football till late in high school, a couple of years at San Diego, transfers to Utah. I mean, there's a bit of a curve with tight ends that have played tight end their whole life, much less a guy that, is kind of late to it. So I think he's completely overlooked. And I think he's going to really become the player he was drafted to be in year 3. He's the X factor for me on offense.
Joe, I totally agree with that. I'm personally big, and it sounds like you are too, on huge Dalton Kincaid bounce back campaign / season, if you will. But for the sake of difference and argument, I'm going to go with wide receiver Josh Palmer. It was clear coming into March for agency, however you want to detail it as, the Bills needed one specific type of receiver. They needed a true man beater that they didn't have, that could beat man coverage and separate downfield with ease. And I don't know about you, but I'm very satisfied with Josh Palmer fitting that role. And I feel like he is a missing piece to what the Bills didn't have in terms of a role, and fits the bill of what I just explained perfectly. On who's your one X factor for defense going to the defensive side of the ball? Who's your one X factor on defense?
I think it's Cole Bishop. He's obviously a player the Bills really wanted to get. They tried to trade up for him. They didn't have to. And I think he had a slow start. He certainly, you listen to him talk during OTAs and felt like he was drinking through a fire hose, trying to learn the defense. And, you've even heard Brandon Beane come out and say, look, it's going to be hard for a rookie to start at safety in our defense. But now he's had the opportunity to have a year of seasoning. And of course he missed a ton of time in training camp, missed almost all of it and all of preseason. And that didn't set him up well to hit the ground running as a rookie. And of course he gets a chance to play in that Houston game. It was a disaster, but the good news is he got better throughout the course of the season with the opportunities that he had to play. And while I don't think he showed that he could be like an impact playmaker as a rookie, I think the fact that he went from a guy that was swimming, upstream and had struggles early to a guy that was sufficient probably by the end of the season. And now you have a full off season in the system, preparing to play safety in the NFL for the Bills as opposed to getting ready to get drafted. I think that puts him in a lot better of a position to step in and maximize on the physical upside that he presents to be a playmaker for this defense. So he's the guy on defense where I'm not necessarily predicting that he steps into becoming this impact playmaker this year. But I think if that can happen, it could be a huge X factor for the defense.
Yeah, my X factor is also at the safety position, but a bit of a different guy via free agency addition, if you will. Safety Derek Forrest. I feel like fans and media in general are massively overlooking this guy. And I know Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, and the staff and the team in general as a whole love Taylor Rapp. But come week 1, am I crazy for saying come week 1, I could definitely see Derek Forrest unseating Taylor Rapp as the starting strong safety. I just feel like this is a really underrated addition.
I think I would be surprised by that. I think Derek Forrest has a chance to maybe be the dime safety, beat out Cam Lewis for that role. Maybe a guy that shows enough this year to think that he could supplant Taylor Rapp in future years. But I think the team really likes Taylor Rapp, so I'd be a little surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm not saying I would agree with it. I'm just saying it's definitely a possibility to look out for. Trey, I want to touch, as we move into more specific draft talk, I want to touch on the Trey Hendrickson trade rumors. Are we at a point where after paying Chase and Higgins, is Hendrickson the odd man out in Cincinnati, which sounds crazy to say because he, second defensive player of the year voting last year, second or third, if I remember correctly. And crazy to say that he's the odd man out because he led the league in sacks last year, but is this a point where he's just going to hold out with the Bengals? He's just not going to budge. And do you think Brandon Beane will take a big swing like Trey Hendrickson? I just feel like Cincinnati is always so weird with how they pay their players and how long they take.
Yeah, they also don't trade players. They have players that request trades all the time and they never get traded. Carson Palmer, Jermaine Pratt has this outstanding trade-off request. Hendrickson requested this last year. Jonah Williams, they don't trade their guys. So I think that's part one of the problem. They've come out and said that he needs to be happy with the money he's making. I don't think it's a good situation in Cincinnati, but I don't think the Bills are going to trade for Trey Hendrickson. I think when they decided to pay Joey Bosa the money that they did, that pretty much told us that there's not going to be an additional move trading for Trey Hendrickson. I'm sure the Bills called. I think they called on Myles Garrett, but ultimately I don't think the compensation made sense, and they decided to invest those dollars into Joey Bosa.
Yeah, what would just in your mind, hypothetically, let's say the Bills would take a legit run at Hendrickson from the Bengals in Cincinnati. What would compensation look like, and what would you personally be willing to give up? Is it a first-round pick, a second-round pick plus? What are we looking at here?
I mean, I think a late first-round pick like the Bills have makes sense to part with. You know, Trey Hendrickson's not a very young player. I mean, maybe it could be a 2 and a 4 or something like that. That's not the hard part of the trade. To me, it's the hard part is the salary piece where you have to onboard the contract and extend him. And that's where it gets complicated for me. And part of the reason why I don't think the Bills are going to be in on this at all.
Yeah. Now, moving on, a bit of a fun exercise here for the pod today. I want to let you kind of throw out two or three names, just a couple of names here and there of guys that are on your quote unquote wish list for the Bills to trade. It can be as unrealistic or not so realistic, or it can be as realistic or not as realistic as you want. Just wish list guys a couple that would really help this team, in your opinion.
You're referring to veterans that they would trade for, or draft prospects?
No, veterans, whether it's before, during, or after the draft, just established veterans.
You know, I think what will ultimately happen here is I'm not really expecting the Bills to be active pursuing veteran trades at this point. I think if they're going to trade for a veteran player, it's going to be around the trade deadline based on needs that come up during the season, where look at last year, they wind up going out and trading for Amari Cooper because they needed to add another player for their receiving game. And the year before it was Rasul Douglas, where you had a need at corner, right? Just things like that happen. I think the Bills are probably content to add what they're going to add in the draft, you know, maybe take advantage of a little bit of the wave of free agency after the draft. They typically will sign a few players in that window, but I just don't feel like the Bills are the type of team right now that's going to be pursuing big name trades, to be honest with you.
Yeah. My wish list, guys, I mean, this is probably not realistic, but I would love to have, like, concussions aside, Chris Olave from the Saints and then Jordan Addison from the Vikings, just because I think they have a lot of weapons. And are they going to pay Jordan Addison the next year or two? So those are kind of some unrealistic guys. Are you just touching on Olave quick? Obviously, the car situation, not good. Is it real? Is it not real? Whatever. Are you concerned with Olave's concussions like some other people are, or do you think it's being over-dramatized a bit?
I mean, I don't think we should ever take head injuries lightly, but I've also seen plenty of players with concussion histories, and, you know, they all have varying results, right? I mean, Mitch Morse came in with a big concussion background and had concussions with the Bills, and that wasn't the reason he retired. And he really didn't miss any time for the Bills due to concussions. So I don't know. The medical stuff is always uncomfortable for me. You know, I don't know how to process it. So I usually rely on doctors and whatever they say. So if you have a medical staff that says, hey, we're unconcerned by this, then I would just take their word for it, because I'm not the medical expert. So, you know, if you want to pursue a Chris Olave trade and you check in on the medicals, your doctors say good to go, then do the trade.
I agree. Now, moving into more specific draft talk, I want to touch on, Joe, 3 scenarios for you. Hit you with 3 scenarios here. First, trading up. Number 1, how far would you be willing to trade up? And number 2, along with it, who are a few guys, 2 or 3 guys here and there, that you would be looking to trade up if they quote unquote slide in next week's draft?
I wouldn't trade up any higher than pick 109 gets me. You know, you package 30 and 109, so that's your first 4th round pick. That probably gets you 5 or 6 spots higher in the first round. That's as far as I would go. I'm not big on parting with the 2nd round pick and moving way up into the top 20. I don't think that's what the Bills should be thinking about doing either. So if the Bills were to trade up, I would hope it's for either Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle out of Michigan, or Derek Harmon, defensive tackle out of Oregon, maybe Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. But for the most part, I really wouldn't. I think those are the 2 nose tackles in this class that give you pass rush upside. So that's why they would be of interest for me to move up. But I wouldn't trade up for a corner. I think there's too much depth there. And I probably wouldn't trade up for an edge rusher, because I think there's too much depth there. So if they traded up, I would hope it's for one of those 2 players. Maybe Will Johnson out of Michigan, the corner. If he slides, you know, I'd have to think about it. but I mean, that'd be it. Will Johnson, Kenneth Grant, or Derek Harmon.
So it sounds like safe to say you're not on this mortgage the future for Abdul Carter thing.
Never. No, I'll never be in that boat unless I'm a team that needs a quarterback and I don't have one. That's it. I really don't like the idea of ever trading up.
Yeah. Now, trading back, because Brandon Beane did it not once, but twice last year, and then we had to quote unquote settle, if you will, for Keon Coleman, if you want to even call it that. But if all the defensive tackles are picked over and all the corners are picked over and you don't want to like reach, and maybe since you don't have a third round pick, you could add a third round pick or two or some extra picks here and there, would you be in favor of a trade back, or would you once again be disappointed like, oh my God, how many times does Brandon Beane have to move around the board up or down? Can he just stay and pick? What would be your thoughts there?
Yeah, the only way I'd be disappointed in the trade back is if they traded away from Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon, right? That would be it.
Yeah.
I don't feel overly convicted about any particular player at pick 30. There's a list of maybe 15 players I'd be totally happy with. And if that's the case, don't stick and pick one. Like, move back. I think the Bills should be thinking about that, especially if you have a team that might want to trade back into the first round for a quarterback. You could kind of put the quarterback tax on it. I mean, outside of some, disdain from fans that are mad that they stayed up late and didn't get a pick, I mean, it's probably a very smart argument to be made that they should trade back if that's the opportunity. But then you're not really, here's the thing. You're not trading back because you want to get extra picks. I think you would trade back because you would then have extra picks that allows you to move up. So move back and then up. Now you're going to be sitting there with pick 33, 56, 62, 109, probably a third round pick as well. Now go get your guys. You don't have to stick and pick one at 30 if there's 10 or 15 names you'd be happy with.
Yeah, Joe, let me throw you this. Let me paint you a picture here quick. Malachi Starks and Nick Emenwari, really good players, but in terms of safety in the first round, doesn't fit this team. I'm sure you would agree. So if those are the best players on the board, then I would trade back. Does that sound about right?
I wouldn't pick those players if I were the Bills. I think those are good players, but they're not the types of players that I think move the needle for the Bills maximizing the opportunity that they have with that pick to improve their football team. So, yeah, I'm hoping to not have the Bills pick a safety early in this draft.
You mentioned staying put at 30. If Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon are there, some other premier defensive guy, whether it be edge, corner, whatever, you don't trade away from a premier defensive guy that could be an impact starter right away, right? This team needs an infusion of youth on the defense, clearly, and you don't trade away from that talent. Would you agree?
I wouldn't trade away from Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I'm most in favor of staying put at 30, but if you have to move up the board a bit, like we touched on for Kenneth Grant, like I have no issues with that if he starts to slide a bit.
Sure. Yeah, I totally align with that.
I always like to look at this hypothetical. What is one position, I have a feeling where you might go with this, but what is one position that you would be like, oh, Brandon Beane, why did you do that? And come on night one in your post-draft pod, and you would be really disappointed with, like, I don't understand this at all.
I mean, probably a safety. Although I think I would be able to understand it. If it's Malachi Starks, I mean, Malachi Starks is going to be a top 12 player for me on my board. I'm sure of it. I love Malachi Starks. I just don't love the idea of him being the Bills' first-round pick because I care way more about D tackle and D end and corner than I do safety. And I feel like they have answers at safety and they just need to let it play out a little bit. And so, I wouldn't be able to argue that the Bills aren't getting a good player that's a first round value. They would, but it's not the way that I feel like they can maximize their opportunity to improve the football team with pick 30.
Yeah, I'm going to like safety as a great call up. With the sake of being different argument, once again, like earlier, I'm going to go with tight end. Like I know this tight end class is deep, but you have Dalton Kincaid. You have Dawson Knox. Weirdly, for some reason, Quentin Morris has not been re-signed, but tight end would really, I think we have a really strong tight end room, and just adding a rookie wouldn't make sense with a high pick. What is a sneaky round one possibility can be a specific player? Let's just paint the picture of they stay at 30. Specific player, position, wherever you want to go with it. A sneaky round one possibility that, in your opinion, we should quote unquote brace ourselves for that no one's talking about right now.
I think based on the pre-draft visits, I mean, it's corner, it's D tackle, it's D end. I'm expecting one of those positions. So I guess any other position would qualify as something that would surprise me. But if I had to, if there's a sneaky one, maybe interior offensive line. where Connor McGovern and David Edwards are both expiring contracts. So Cyrus Torrence is going to be very expensive to extend, and he's extension eligible after this season. So, I mean, maybe there's a world where they get ahead of a need at interior offensive line, but I think it's probably going to be corner, D tackle, or D end.
Yeah. I'm going to go with running back. I don't think I would agree with it, but like, what if they're saying we got to move on from James Cook because of his complaints and contract demands and all that? What if they draft TreVeyon Henderson at 30? I wouldn't agree with it, but he's a talented player. And I think you've mentioned on a few podcasts numerous times that TreVeyon Henderson and James Cook play a very similar play style. So,
well, I think James Cook wishes he was the pass protector that TreVeyon Henderson is. That would be a nice addition to the lead back role. I like TreVeyon Henderson a ton. He's one of my favorite prospects in the draft, regardless of position. Yeah, if you make that pick, we better also hear an announcement that James Cook's been traded. You got something meaningful back in return, because there'd be no purpose in having both of those players on the roster at the same time.
Yeah. Now, straight up here with this exercise, what are your top 3 needs for the Bills? And to put a little fun spin on it, name your dream prospect for each position, whether that's trade up, trade back, or ideally stay at 30. Let's start with your number 3 and go in reverse order.
I think my third priority would be defensive end, but it's a top 3 need. I think it's a primary need, but defensive end would be number 3. And my dream prospect, you're talking about a pick 30 is what you're talking about?
It can be trade up or ideally pick 30, wherever you want to go with it.
I guess the Shamar Stewart, I would just really be interested by the ceiling that he offers, but I mean, I'd be happy with Nick Scorton or Landon Jackson. You know, those are players that I like as well, but I'll say Shamar Stewart because I think, he's least likely to be available at pick 30.
Same thing. My number 3 need is defensive end, and I would heavily support a little move up the board for Shamar Stewart. My number 2 need is corner, and my dream prospect for that is Maxwell Hairston. Christian Benford's I love him, but he's not the most athletic guy in the world, and the Bills have never really had uber athletic, great athleticism corners, and obviously the speed matches the tape with Maxwell Hairston. So number 1, what's your opinion on Hairston? And number 2, what's your number 2 need for the Bills and a dream fit for that position?
I like Hairston a lot. I think he's a great zone corner that's very aggressive, good ball skills. He's a striker. He's a little lean, but I like the overall package. He's on the list of 15 guys I'd be satisfied with at pick 30 for sure. I would say that corner is number 2 for me as well. I think my dream player would be Will Johnson out of Michigan, who I think is one of the 10 best players in the draft, but there's some rumblings that he could fall a little bit. They got the turf toe thing going this past season, and I guess he didn't run a great 40, or some concerns about his time speed. I've never watched his tape one time and had a concern about his speed. Will Johnson would definitely be the dream. We're talking big swing here. There's plenty of corners I'd like, but Will Johnson, he's a different kind of cat.
Yeah, Joe, I have a feeling we're going to be on the same page at number 1 need, but just for sake of argument, who's your number 1 need for the Bills heading into the draft? And once again, a dream fit.
Yeah, it's D tackle, and I mean, honestly, it's probably Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon. You could flip a coin. I think that they are perfect nose tackles for this defense because they're not just big slugs that can defend the run. They have legit quickness and ability to penetrate and pass rush. And so you give me an up the field nose that can defend the run and rush the passer. I think that would be exactly what this defense needs.
I'm also going to go D tackle. Dream fit would be Kenneth Grant, whether that's pick at 30, if he falls somehow, no clue how he would, or a quick move up. Real quick, I see defensive tackle Walter Nolan, mocked a lot out of Ole Miss. It sounds like you're a little lower on him than consensus, but what are your quick thoughts on him?
I like Walter Nolan a ton. He'll carry a late first, early second round grade from me. I think with him, in terms of projecting him to the Bills, I worry that the Bills are going to be in on the personality. A lot of thoughts out there that he's got an entitlement about him, big time recruit. And that's not really what the Bills are looking for. They want guys that have kind of had to earn it and have faced adversity. And, Walter Nolan doesn't seem like the reports are that he's wired that way. So he's a really, really, really talented football player, but I don't know if he's got the Bills DNA, if you will.
So based off of that, is he someone who's not on your top 15 players list that you wouldn't trade away from?
Well, so I don't have a list of 15 players that I wouldn't trade away from. I have a list of 15 players that I'm probably satisfied with at pick 30. Yeah. Yeah. If the Bills made Walter Nolan the 30th pick in the draft, I'd be content with that. And I think that's something I'm really trying to communicate right now is, people get married to certain outcomes and, they fall in love with a certain idea, and like, it's probably not going to happen. So don't do that to yourself. Like, open your mind to a lot of different possibilities that would make sense. And Walter Nolan certainly fits that criteria for me.
Yeah. Now, Joe, before we get out of here today, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. But I want to do a quick 7-run mock simulation. Listen, there's 10 picks here. They're not going to make 10 picks. I'm sure you would agree. There's only room for 5, maybe 6 rookies on this roster. Brandon Beane loves trading late on picks, so for future assets. So let's just get that out of the way. But just for fun, all 10. Round 1, pick 30. I don't understand how in all these simulations he's here, but defensive tackle Kenneth Grant from Michigan. We've already touched on him quite a bit in today's pod. Not much there more. Round 2, pick 56. Ole Miss D-line was just like very talented. Princely Umanmielen from Ole Miss, round 2, pick 56. In terms of all the edge rushers, what is your kind of pulse on him, if you will? Have you done a deep dive on him?
Yeah. He's a likable player. He's just very finesse. And I worry about that. Like in the NFL, you can't just run around people. You got to be able to play through them. And so I don't know that I see enough power elements to get overly excited, especially for the Bills and their scheme and what they ask out of their edge rushers. But I think for some teams, he would make a lot of sense. But he's not a priority player for me when it comes to the Bills.
So not as the draft as a whole, but for the Bills, would Landon Jackson be more of a fit then?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think he's a better prospect significantly and a much better fit for the Bills.
Yeah. I know this is a favorite of yours. Round 2, pick 62. Corner Jacob Parrish, Kansas State. I know he's a little undersized, so people have kind of cooled off.
Yeah, he's not undersized. He's just a little short. He's got plenty of length. He's got plenty of mass.
That's in terms of height. That's what I'm undersized. But one, what is your overall thoughts in terms of athleticism, ball skills on Jacob Parrish? And number 2, would he fit this defense perfectly and be the starting corner day 1 opposite Benford?
I like Jacob Parrish a ton. I think he's got a lot of coverage versatility, thrives in man coverage, very sticky, physical tackles, ball skills are really good.
Yep.
Can play off man coverage. I think where you would maybe question Jacob Parrish is he's not a traditional true zone corner. And so if the Bills were to draft him, it would be a pretty clear indicator to me that they are looking to diversify their coverage with more man coverage, with more press man coverage. So that's what would be interesting about him. But I mean, great tape, good length, physical, sticky in coverage, and he's a corner with a wrestling background. Sean McDermott's going to love that.
No, yeah, for sure. He loves those guys. No round 3 pick, which I'm sure will change, but for this exercise, round 4, pick 109. Safety Jalen Reed from Penn State. I don't think they're going to make a massive addition like people are expecting at safety. So I think Jalen Reed is a nice high floor player that you can get in the middle rounds, in my opinion.
I mean, he doesn't really have a starter profile to me. So I think he's more of a depth player. And I don't know, a high 4th round pick on a guy that I think projects as a depth safety is not something that moves the needle too much for me.
Another 4th round pick, round 4, pick 132. I think him and Josh Palmer can spit the quote unquote downfield separation ability stuff. So wide receiver Dante Thornton from Tennessee. I mean, at 6'5", he moves. He shouldn't be able to move like that 6'5", but he does. So what are your quick thoughts on him? I really like him as a day 3 sleeper here.
Yeah, a very underdeveloped player. I think he's just tall and fast. I'd want a lot more well-rounded skill set for this type of investment.
Fair.
You're talking about a guy that at 2 different programs that love to throw the football, he didn't have much in the way of production. So he's a buyer beware guy for me for sure.
I would have taken Kyle Williams from Washington State for that role, but he was gone. And I think I like Kyle Williams more anyway, but he wasn't.
Yeah, I think you're talking about 4 rounds better of a prospect than Kyle Williams.
Now they have 3 5th-round picks somehow. So round 5, pick 169. I'm double dipping here. Defensive tackle Vernon Broughton from Texas. I really like him. Him and Alfred Collins were quite the duo in Austin last year in Texas. So what are your quick thoughts on Vernon Broughton? To me, this is a couple round value. I think he could go round 3. Getting him here in round 5 with the double dip is really encouraging to me.
I haven't watched him. I don't have any opinions on him. No.
I really like him just from watching games live and stuff. Round 5, pick 170. I know the linebacker, they need a depth linebacker to upgrade over like Balin Spector, push some other guys. So linebacker Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon. I think you've done this in a couple of your simulations, but what are your quick thoughts on him fitting with this defense? I really like him as a fit.
Yeah, I like him. That's a good one. I think he's got good range profile as well as a matchup style backer that can play in space. I think he's got to clean up some angles and play things a little tighter and faster, but I think he's a very intriguing developmental linebacker in that range. I like that pick.
Yeah, I really love this one. Round 5, pick 173, tight end Thomas Fidone from Nebraska. Number 1, you get all the blocking with Quentin Morris. And number 2, I think he has decent receiving upside as well. I feel like he's one of the more underrated prospects in this loaded tight end class. So I'm sure you would agree, do you?
Well, yeah, I think the thing there is he had back-to-back ACL tears, and then he did have 2 healthy seasons. So that kind of is something you got to think about with him. But I think the receiving profile is very, very strong. I think he's a very willing blocker, and I think he'd be a great tight end 3.
Do you find it weird that Quentin Morris is still out there? Like, how is he not back already?
Well, I totally understand why he's not back already. Quentin Morris is trying to make a roster, and I think for him, he probably wants to wait until after the draft to see like what opportunity is going to be the most logical for him. And, you know, he's a guy that could certainly come back to Buffalo on a 1-year deal, but I think the Bills also might want to have a guy on a cost controlled deal as a tight end 3, as opposed to kind of the 1-year veteran minimum, kind of give yourself some long-term appeal there. So I think it's a fallback. I think the Bills will let this draft play out. And if they get a tight end that they like to be the tight end 3, you know, they're good. But if they don't ever get to the point where there's a logical choice there, I think you call up Quentin Morris and get that done.
Yeah, a couple here. Round 6, pick 177 with the Cook stuff and the running back uncertainty. If you will, I'm going with Jaden Blue from Texas. I really like the receiving upside and explosiveness, if you will. So it's an RB3. I really like the upside here. It's a great fit in the 6th round, in my opinion.
If you tell me he fixes the fumbling issues, I'd be fine with that. He's one fumble per 30 touches. I mean, that ain't going to play in the NFL. So I like the big play potential that he offers, but dude's got to learn to hang on to the football. And I think the challenge is, you know, if the Bills do draft the running back, you got to roster 4 running backs, and they don't do that, and they shouldn't do that. And so you have to kind of get into some murky waters with roster ability. And are you just thinking that someone's going to get hurt and then you can sneak a guy through? You know, it kind of gets a little bit dicey.
Last here, marathon 10 picks. Round 6, pick 206. I double dipped again. Defensive end Kyman Rucker from UNC. I feel like this guy had more hype a year or so ago, and now it's died down significantly. I really like the power to him. 1, have you watched him? And 2, if so, what do you think about his fit here in the 6th round?
Yeah, I have no thoughts on him. I didn't evaluate him.
Okay. Well, Joe, that's the mock simulation with the 10 picks. Again, move up or whatever. But thank you for joining us for the review show today. Please tell the audience how we can best support you in the final days leading up to the draft and, of course, beyond with all your work.
Yeah, appreciate that. Locked On Bills, the daily podcast that I host on the Buffalo Bills. It's wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. So that's the spot. And appreciate you having me, Aiden.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, have a great day. And real quick, any specific plans for the draft? How do you pass the time on draft day? What's your draft day like?
I try to rest as much as possible because, you know, those are long days and long. I mean, you're talking Thursday. I mean, really Thursday, Friday, Saturday, just literally all day consumed with what's going on. So I try to get some rest and then make sure that I'm in position to serve Bills Mafia the best I can and give them content. I have a lot of film analysis planned on whoever the Bills pick. So, you know, make sure that I'm rested well enough to get through all of it and give it my very best.
Yeah. One last thing before we get out of here. Sorry, but I wanted to ask this. At this time of year, 6 or so days till the draft, do you feel like, oh man, I got to watch a few more prospects? Or are you like, okay, I'm ready. Let's get going here.
That answer is probably different every year. This year, I definitely have probably one more day's worth of film study to do at this point. So I'll be relieved when that's over. But when I'm done with film, I'm always ready for the draft to get there as soon as possible. But, you know, based on the dynamics of that particular year, that changes. There's times I'm done with film, you know, beginning of April. And so when that's the case, it's like, can we just push fast forward? When I'm not in that position like this year, it's like I need as much time as possible.
Well, for Joe Marino, for myself, Aiden, we will see you all next time on Around the Slice. Thank you again, Joe. See you all next time. Bye.